The British philosopher Alain de Botton said, "If you're not embarrassed by who you were 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough." The idea is simple. You're not who you used to be. You're not the same person you used to be. You don't care about the things your former self used to care about. A very powerful exercise or activity you can do is to actually map out how you got to where you are. Think about your current self and all the stages that you went through to get to where you are. Actually break it up. Break up yourself, it could be your career or it could be the last 10 years of your life, into 5 stages, 4 or 5 stages. And label those stages and the identity you had in each of those stages and the game you were playing, the thing you were trying to achieve at that stage, and then ultimately the tipping point or the breakthrough that ultimately got you to a higher stage. So look back on the last 10 years and break it up into 3, 4, or 5 stages. And at each level, think about who you were, what you were focused on, what you cared about, and then ultimately there was a tipping point moment that got you to the next stage. Let me give my friend as an example. I'll keep his name anonymous. So 10 years ago, he was working at eBay. And basically the game he was playing at that point was fitting in with his friends, but also he was trying to save up. He was trying to get stock options. He was trying to save up a certain amount of money so that eventually when he had enough saved, he would try to start his own business. So that was the game he was playing. The identity he had back then was that of an employee, but he was very unhappy. And eventually at one point, one of his friends came and said, "Look, I'm not happy with my job, you're not happy. How about we become partners and how about we start a business together?" And so he thought about it, and ultimately that was the tipping point because he felt secure doing it with someone else. He would have been too afraid to make that leap by himself, but because someone else wanted to help him do it and was also convincing him of how unhappy he was, he had a tipping point moment where he bailed from his job at eBay, and then he started working with this friend. And his identity shifted. He kind of saw himself more as a partner or as an entrepreneur. And for the next several years, they worked together. But they were very limited. He was very limited, and it was a better stage. It was definitely a growth stage, and he learned a lot through that second stage that he was not learning at the former stage. But eventually, he grew out of that stage. And a tipping point moment he had, one was that he and this partner had a lot of arguments that frustrated him. He also felt like he was squelched and limited in his potential. He felt like he was disrespected. But he was also spending a lot of time studying online marketing and studying entrepreneurship and studying what it really took to make a lot of money. And he was educating him so much, and one day he was actually at an event. He was at a marketing event where he learned all these strategies and mindsets, and it was a peak experience for him. It was a tipping point moment where he realized he was limiting himself so much that he needed to get out of this relationship. And so in that moment, he went home and he wrote in his journal, he said, "I'm no longer going to be in this partnership." And then the next day he made the call, the hard call, and he left that partnership. And then now he's moved on, and he's now doing online internet marketing, and he's making millions of dollars, and he's surrounding himself by new people. And so I just broke up his last decade into 3 stages. He could have broken up each of those stages even into more stages. And so now he identifies himself as an entrepreneur and as an investor. And so he has a totally different identity, and he's playing a different game than he was at his former levels. And so what I want you to think about is what are the levels that got you here? The levels of learning. Also, what was the game you were playing? What was the identity you had at each level? You could break it up. I could give myself as an example. So back in 2010, I had just gotten home from serving a church mission, and I was going to community college. The game I was playing was getting straight A's and getting into college. Then I ended up getting into college, studying psychology, and the game I was playing was getting into graduate school, getting research experience, reading books. I would categorize that as kind of my undergraduate college self, and I was very much a student. I was a learner. Then I evolved out of that game. I got into a graduate program, a PhD program, and then my focus shifted, and the game I was playing was twofold. One was learning psychology, learning research, and getting the PhD, but the other side was that I really started going for my dream of becoming a professional writer. And it was during my PhD program that I actually did become a professional writer. I learned how to blog and get millions of views. I learned how to get book deals. I even became an entrepreneur, and I learned how to make lots of money. And so that stage was very much my writer stage. I've since evolved out of that, and now I'm more in an entrepreneurial stage where I do still write books, but I'm also leading teams. I'm pursuing bigger goals. I'm doing a lot more collaboration than I used to do. And so now I'm more in an entrepreneurial stage, but I'm also very much in a father and family stage. We adopted 3 kids from the foster system while I was doing my PhD, but my kids are becoming increasingly important to me. I actually have 6 kids. And so although I'm an entrepreneur and an investor and someone who's focused on making money and also focused on learning, growth, transformation, and I'm even still enjoying writing books, I identify less as a writer. I identify more as an entrepreneur and as an investor and someone who's thinking about the future. But I also identify very strongly with my kids, especially the 3 older ones that we adopted who are 13, 11, and 9. And my focus is on them. I'm playing a different game than I played in the past. I'm also creating very different outcomes. I'm focused on different things. I'm freer than my former self used to be. And so my invitation to you is to look back and to define or to delineate your former growth stages, the game you were playing, the identity you had, the focus you had, and ultimately what was the experience that allowed you to upgrade and get into a bigger game, a better game, a higher level game. And then you could think about your current self and the game that you're currently playing. What is the thing you're playing? What is the thing you're striving for? What are you trying to accomplish? And then you can project forward. Who is your future self? What's the game they're playing? What's their identity? What are they striving for? What would they like you to start getting aware of? Because right now you may not even be aware of the things that are important to your future self. Obviously, you want to be present. You want to be in this game, but you want to think, where is this game leading? Or where should I direct this game towards so that I can ultimately evolve out of it into the next level? What is the tipping point or the peak experience I need to evolve out of this game and into the bigger game? So that's an invitation I have for you. You have had amazing growth experiences. You've been playing different games all along. You've had different identities, and now you've evolved to this level. What was the learning? What were the experiences that ultimately led you to the moment you're at right now? Who is your future self, and what is the learning and development you need to go through to get to the higher level, bigger games that you might not even be currently aware of? Take some time. Seriously, take some time. It won't take long. Pull out your journal and just write down the growth stages that you've been through over the last 10 years or 5 years, whatever you want to call it, and break those stages down based on the game you were playing, the identity you had within that game, what you thought success was at that game, and then ultimately the experience, the learning, the knowledge, or the situation that ultimately allowed you to evolve into a higher level game. Just reflecting on those stages kind of allows you to create an arc on your past identity. Your identity is the narrative and story you tell about yourself, but it's also powerful to think about. Right now you're focused on something, you're playing a game, but what about your former self was stopped, was limited, what was the obstacles in the way of your former self at the different, at the lower levels that stopped them from evolving up into the game? Just as an example, and I've talked about it before, when I was the writer version of me, back when I was in graduate school, I would have loved to film videos like this, but I didn't understand a few principles. I didn't understand Who Not How, which is a book I wrote with Dan Sullivan. I didn't understand the investment mindset, and I was overly just trying to become a writer, but I wanted to film videos like this, but there was too many constraints on my mind. There was internal and external obstacles. I had made it too complicated. And that's one thing that we all do. We all overly complicate what it's going to take to achieve our goals when really there is a simple way. Often that simple way is simply just asking for help or asking for advice. But the answers to your questions are not as complex as you think. We make them very complex because we're afraid, because we're ignorant, and because we're afraid of loss. And so we just don't try new things that ultimately get us to the next level until eventually we either have to or until eventually we get committed to. So you can watch the next video. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and have an amazing day. See you.